of hope and redemption from those behind bars. Intertwining his own life struggles and spiritual quests, his mission of helping others provides a powerful testament to the human potential for change and growth and hope. Welcome.
I paid him to do that. No.
Would you like that
Yes,
here?
please. Yes, thank you. I wasn't expecting that. I love First, and today is my first time being with you. I have been in many UU congregations, and if I wasn't a Muslim, I'd be a UU. So thank you, and that was a wrap. So. Today I want to share with you a remarkable journey that began as the CEO of the second largest property management company in Los Angeles, California. Sounds like it is. Is it not? Thank you. There we go. Let's see, is it on now, Lim? Wonderful. So I'm sorry that the folks on cyberspace missed the joke, because I don't make many good ones, but welcome. It's an honor again to be with you, and thank you. That job as the CEO of the second largest property management company did not bring me a lot of fulfillment. It didn't give me a lot of hope. The stories that I share today of inspiration and hope, I hope, emerged from my work in prison ministry. They are meant to illuminate the power of micro, meso, and macro successes, small, medium, and large successes, and transforming the lives of those who have found themselves behind bars. So before we get into the meat of this, I'd like everybody to take a deep breath. Just as if you don't have asthma or any kind of breathing conditions, breathe as deeply as you can through your nose. Fill your belly as full as you can, and then just let it out. And do it again, and just allow yourself to get here, to leave the car in the parking lot, the unpaid bills on the desk, and whatever else that you might be thinking about. Just allow yourself to come to this sanctuary of safety. And perhaps for those of you who are visual, I want you to envision for a moment a young man coming from a detention center or woman, being stripped of all their clothing, defleed in an inhumane way, standing before males and females naked. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a living situation where you have no control ever again of when the lights go on or when the lights go off. You have no control of when you get to shower or when you don't get to shower. You have no control of what you eat and when you eat. You have no control of who you shower with and whether you shower or not if you don't shower at the time given. I want you to imagine those folks trying to find hope. I was, again, a young, hardworking, and dedicated family man, blessed to be married to the woman of my dreams, my South African queen, Nuran. I wore a beeper, carried a brick-sized mobile phone, drove a high-profile car, and worked copious hours chasing worldly success. In South Africa, I was earning in the top 5% of the country. But even with all the trappings of prosperity, something essential was missing in my life. I was sad that I could not physically be there and provide the monetary support at the same time that my family needed. I had 4 children, my wife and I, that I longed to spend quality time with and dreamed before ever getting married that that's what it would be like, right? I was also not reaching my spiritual goals, which had long been the cornerstone of my life. I started preaching before 9 years of age and was preaching in an African American church in rural North Carolina the year that Martin Luther King was assassinated. I was a bit of a radical, but I've grown up. As a couple, our mission statement was simple yet profound. Consistently engage with our children, create rituals of emotional connection, and maximize quality time with each other. But it's hard to do that. I couldn't find hope to do that when I was working 16-hour days. But life often has its plans. And these objectives just slowly slipped out of reach. I wasn't fulfilling my dreams. I wasn't fulfilling my vision as a father, as a husband. And then everything happened on June the 27th, 1987. After 7 years of studying Islam, which I don't remember ever hearing about as a North Carolinian, I traveled to South Africa after deciding to leave the church. I had a full scholarship to Duke to be a Methodist minister. But I had some doctrinal conflicts, so I rejected the scholarship and ran away to South Africa without my Bible. When I arrived, I heard the beautiful adhan, the call to prayer. And I hadn't cried for 7 years, and I just began to sob profusely. And it hit the soundboard of my heart. I'm also a musician, so I really relate to sound and the reverberation, the effect of sound on a human being. And I asked my host what that was, and they didn't speak very nicely about it, let's just say that. But it touched me. There was a call there. It was a moment of clarity. It was a eureka experience for me when I realized that I wanted to live a life aligned with my spiritual aspirations and that was more important to me than money. I longed to return to university. After all, I was growing and realizing that my amygdala was not working when I made that decision not to accept that scholarship at Duke. So I knew that in order to make this change, to embrace the spiritual the way that I wanted to, it was going to require a tremendous amount of change, a lifestyle change. And instead of living in perhaps a 6-bedroom home, living in a 3-bedroom home or something. My wife was on board. We had prayed about this, meditated about this. And about that time, I received an offer to be the president of the largest property management company in Los Angeles, earning over 6 figures. At the second interview, I became inspired, and I looked at the president, the then president of the company, and said, I'm tired of making a living. I want to live a making. I'm not taking this job. He thought I was using that as, reverse psychology or to get more money. So he said, look, what do you want? You tripled one business in 3 years. What do you want? Just tell me what you want. I said, you don't understand. It's not about money. And then I got in my car, my high-profile car, and thought, I'm going to go home and tell my wife that I just turned down 6 figures and was given the opportunity to just tell the man what I wanted. How's this going to turn out for me? I went to tell my wife, and she said, I'm so proud of you. I believe God has a greater purpose for your life. She believed, and she supported. She had hope. Seeking work-life balance, we embarked on what I now call our station wagon pilgrimage. From Los Angeles, California, to eastern North Carolina. Don't judge. With 3 breastfeeding daughters, age 4, 3, and 1.5. Intent on building a new life where I could return to school and truly make a difference in life. help create a world that worked for everyone. We arrived in Wallace, North Carolina, population 3,103. What followed was a godly intervention. And by the way, I know that we have atheists among us. I love you the same, but I do believe in God. So I want you to know I respect you for your belief, but I will refer to God because this testimony would not make sense without it. My mother sent me a 24-hour Federal Express letter stating that I was no longer welcomed into our family home until I changed my name and my religion. Now, I already had the furniture loaded up, and we were on our way to leave California. My mom and dad had divorced a couple of years before that. My dad was going through his second divorce, and he couldn't house us. And I called Dad, and I said, Dad, I need help. I'm on the way with our family, and Mom has said we cannot stay there. We were just going to stay there temporarily. Probably a good thing we didn't, because there might have been a familial homicide. Just kidding. So my dad said, give me 2 hours. Now, you got to put this in perspective. My father is a country farm family person who worked in textiles. He could not pronounce Abdurrahman. So he went to this apartment that fortuitously happened to be on the very same street I was born on. It had been built after I left town. And when he approached the manager, he said, I cannot pronounce my son's name, but he's coming back to Wallace and he needs a place to stay. She said, do you know that he used to play the piano for me? He used to accompany me to sing in church. We would love to have him. Divine intervention. She extended a radical welcome, and the apartment was ready when we arrived 4 days later. The local newspaper that I had penned articles in at age 15 ran a front page story about my return. Douglas Sykes comes back with a new name and a new religion. Didn't go down well with Mom. Can you imagine? She was not pleased. There we were, my wife in hijab, I in a kufi, which I didn't wear today, walking through a country town with just over 3,000 residents. On Sunday afternoon walks, me and my jalabia, my wife at her hijab, we would hear people on their porch say, well, there goes Joseph and Mary. At that point, here I am. We usually try to grow and not digress or regress. I'm finding myself back on my birth street with a community that doesn't understand me, and I'm a traitor because I left the Christian church. Matter of fact, one woman accosted my wife in the parking lot and said, I ought to whip your tail. In real Southern, I ought to whip your tail for taking our Douglas away from Christianity. Yeah, that was one of my wife's first encounters in that little town. My apartment manager came to me and said this, you've been a leader all your life. You need to go back to school. And I laughed. I thought she was just being hysterical. I said, yeah, how am I going to do that? I got 3 kids and a wife to support. She said, I don't know how you're going to do it, but did you know that living in these particular apartments, if you go to school full time, the Farmers Association of North Carolina will actually pay 2/3 of your rent. I thought, there's got to be a catch to this. This can't be real. So I said, then what happens? I become an indentured servant for the rest of my life? She said, no. So as I drove into the campus of the local community college to return to school, at what age? 30, I think, something like that. I was wearing a kufi, and I vaguely remember seeing an inmate, but not even thinking about it being an inmate, but seeing this guy glaring through a fence, looking at me. I had this conscious memory of this. And a very handsome Jamaican man walked up to me on the campus. He was on work release from that prison. Hey, dude, not Muslims. He said, there's some Muslims over there and they want you to go teach them. Well, I said, I am really sorry, but I don't know what you mean by over there. I just arrived from California. He said, well, that's a prison over there, and they want you to go teach them. And I said, I don't know anybody in prison, and nobody in prison knows me. I was a little paranoid at this point because I wasn't used to having inmates approach me like this. And I said, I'm not qualified. I could be a hypocrite. Just because I got a kufi on my head doesn't mean anything. But they had hope. That was a Wednesday. He came back after lunch and handed me a petition with 14 Muslim names on it and the warden's name and phone number. And I began to cry. And I'm a crybaby, so just let me prepare you. I love to cry. And I knew that this was a godly intervention again, that something was going on that was beyond the worldly realm. I called that warden, and he said, can you meet with me tomorrow? Because we don't know what the hell to do with these inmates. We don't know anything about Islam. We are lost, and we need direction. Friday, I did my first sermon there, just 2 days later. This happened to be an honor camp that prepares inmates for release back into the world. I had an old Sanford & Son pickup, and I would ask in my classes if I could clean out folks' attics or garages as long as they would give me what I cleaned out. And I stood on the side of the street and I sold shirts for 25 cents in order to go back to school and take care of my family. I mowed 19 acres of grass was one of the jobs I had. My journey into prison ministry began 4 years and 11 months after I embraced Islam. In 1995, I was honored as the North Carolina Department of Correction Volunteer of the Year in the Bible Belt. In 1997, I became the first institutional Muslim chaplain/imam for the North Carolina Department of Correction. The Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act, called RFRA, of 1993 stirred the world of chaplaincy because it allowed inmates to practice their faith with the least amount of restrictions. And this really upset the Christian template that had been operated for all these years. I remember one chaplain that worked for me, he said, I'm scared to give a Wiccan and candle because I know I'm going to go to hell if I do that. And then I said, well, then you should retire because this is not the right job for you. You signed a contract to give the least restrictive practice to anyone that had a national faith body in this country. This is not a Christian work. This is a work for all. My academic career continued. In 1998, a Muslim chaplain in Virginia called to encourage me to apply for a scholarship to get a master's degree in Islamic studies. I laughed again and said, don't waste my time. Nobody's going to give a white man a scholarship to study Islam. It's not going to happen. And I said, in any way, you're in Virginia, I'm in North Carolina, I'm making $27,000 a year, and I've got 3 kids. Actually, 3 at the time. He persisted. No, you have to come. I've seen your curriculum vitae. I've seen your academic achievements. We want you. So I said, well, I'll get him off my back, right? If you could find me transportation, I'll come. He did. When I arrived, another godly intervention took place. A man that I loved dearly that was in the masjid right after I did my shahada when I became a Muslim happened to be there. Just coincidentally happened to be there. And guess who I roomed with? He was in his 80s. I roomed with that man. 3 weeks later, I received my acceptance letter. And my Republican supervisor at the North Carolina Department of Correction, I was hoping he would frown upon all of this because it was going to be difficult. It was going to cost me a lot of money to travel every week. He said, "Oh, we've already arranged this, Sykes. We've got a 4 10-hour work week for you." No matter where I went, I couldn't get anybody that could sway me away from this thing. I earned my Master's of Religious Practice at the Graduate School of Islamic and Social Sciences in 2002. In 2001, just before 9/11, I moved here to be one of 10 imams for the Department of Justice. I landed in D.C. 4 minutes after the plane hit the Pentagon. I was detained by the FBI and the OIG for 9 days. I commuted weekly to finish my degree. At my facility, I had 23 practicing faith groups. There were chaplains that we do not want to work for that man. He's nuts. And I can't support all these religions. But it was a federal policy. When the priest and rabbi walked through the prison yard with me, we were called the God Squad. They'd say, "There comes the God Squad." Our mission was clear: to ensure that inmates had some hope, that they had the least restrictive means to worship. I also invited an honor camp inmate to my home for weekly dinners. I wanted my children to see humanity in others, and I wanted them to know that redemption was possible for every human being. I wanted them to see it. I wanted it to be in action. One of the visitors had the most beautiful dreadlocks I've ever seen in my life, except my son's. My son, I think, was inspired by him. He came often to visit with us and to have dinner with us. But you want to hear about success stories, so let's start. On the micro level, let's imagine James, incarcerated for a nonviolent crime. He was angry and hopeless. But with the support of a chaplain who saw his potential, James learned to read and write, found a love for art, and today he is a free man, a successful artist, and a beacon of hope in his community. Another, I hate the word inmate, another one of our residents was Jimmy. Jimmy shared his dream of becoming a chef. I believed in him and created a training program for him. When I retired, he was not only a chef, but a mentor in the correctional system. These are micro-level triumphs, one person at a time. At the meso level, we launched programs like Hope Behind Bars, programs that fostered entire community change within the prison. So I said to my Republican supervisor, "Do you want to have a vibrant chaplaincy program here?" He said, "Of course we do, Imam Sykes." I said, "Then you've got to get rid of these Christian volunteers." Yep. And he said, "What?" What? I said, "Yeah." I said, "Have you ever been to a black worship service?" He said, "Well, no, of course not." I said, "But then you need to. Because black people don't worship like white people. And we need to bring African Americans in this prison to minister to African Americans." I won, and we changed it. We had the oldest volunteer in North Carolina, and they flipped out on me. But he was dethroned, and it was time for someone to be empowered that could speak the language of those inmates. We introduced vocational training, construction, plumbing, and electrical work, which reduced recidivism and rebuilt lives. And then Hurricane Katrina came. August the 29th, 2005, hundreds of inmates in New Orleans were abandoned. Some were locked in ground floor cells with chest-high water. By the time they were rescued, 517 inmates were missing. When they arrived at the Federal Correctional in Coleman, Florida, I helped activate the newly built facility there where I welcomed these traumatized residents. My priority was family reunification. Many didn't know whether their loved ones had survived, if they were alive, if their homes that they'd left behind still existed. These inmates had gone through hell and high water, literally. What emerged, though, was the best of chaplaincy: compassion, action, and healing. At the macro level, we saw systemic changes. Ban the box is an example of that. Legislation across several states prohibited employers from asking about criminal records on job applications, giving returning citizens a chance at fair employment. If any of you ever had a family member that has a felony, you know that you can't rent an apartment. This wasn't just reform, it was redemption. One of the most emotional cases I advocated for was an elderly couple desperate to see their only son released before his father died. The parole board denied the request, but my wife and I still stay in touch with his 94-year-old mother. As a matter of fact, she's in the hospital today. My wife checks on her every single day. So pray for Wilma. We still stay in touch with a 94-year-old lady because hope doesn't retire. In conclusion, the power of micro, meso, and macro level successes in prison ministry cannot be underestimated. Every story, whether it's a personal transformation, a prison-wide reform, or a systemic policy shift, is a beacon of hope. My journey from CEO to chaplain has taught me this: even in the darkest of places, God plants seeds of light. Those seeds blossom into purpose. Pain is transformed to purpose. Redemption and renewal when nurtured with faith, compassion, and belief in the human potential. Let our talk today be a testimony that even in the most unlikely places, God's intervention can lead us to live not merely for a living, but to live a making. Thank you so much.